Good morning, Star Trek fans. This is Josh Pritchett, writer, film critic for Movers and Shakers Unlimited, and head of the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup Group. And welcome to another edition of Trek PHENOMS, a study of Star Trek Prodigy. Well, we had a bit of a turnabout intruder this week, didn't we, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else? It is. It was rather an interesting episode, and I think we should just go ahead and dive right into it. So let's go fast. Okay, so we pick up where we left off last week's episode, where the crew has just extradited themselves from the holodeck. Holo Janeway has realized that her file has been corrupted by the weapon that is going to basically destroy the Federation unless they find a way to get it off the ship. Meanwhile, the Dauntless is closing in on our heroes. So Holo Janeway shuts herself down so that she will not know anything what the rest of the crew is planning to do. The crew is unable to control their ship, but suddenly the Protostar fires up the warp drive and starts heading on a course towards the heart of the Federation. Meanwhile, back on the Dauntless, Janeway is still unconscious after being knocked out by the Diviner. Has the Diviner and his allies prepared to try to complete their plan to destroy the Federation. Janeway is then shoved into a closet without her comm badge, and they attempt to carry on as if normal. The Dauntless begins pursuing the Protostar through warp space and is trying to merge their warp bubble with the Protostar's warp bubble in an attempt to beam aboard the Protostar once they have taken down its shields with their phasers. So suddenly, Zero and Rock Talk get a great idea. What if they could contact Janeway telepathically using Zero's Medusan mental abilities? Zero, though, says that if he had his hive mind, he could probably do that. Unfortunately, he is one single Medusan. But then Rock Talk comes up with the idea that, hey, wait a minute, Dal has telepathic abilities in his latent DNA. Vulcan, Beta Z, pre-energy being Organian, a few others. They decide to try it by having Dal send the message using Zero has an antenna. Unfortunately, when the Dauntless fires her phasers, it causes a slight variation, and some of Dal's other telepathic DNA strands kick in, and we have a bit of a turnabout intruder situation. Of course, as probably a lot of you remember, turnabout intruder is a reference to an old episode from the original series in which Kirk and another person end up switching bodies. So Dal finds himself in Janeway's body, and Janeway is in Dal's body. So, of course, Dal being a teenage kid, he sort of panics, wondering where the heck he is, thinking he's in some sort of dream, and then realizes that he's trapped. Meanwhile, back on the Protostar, our crew explains to Admiral Janeway, in Dal's form, what's been going on, why they haven't been able to contact them, and how much they'd like to get the Protostar back to Starfleet. But because of the weapon, they don't dare to do this. Janeway understands and apologizes for making assumptions about them, and that she's going to help them figure out a way to get the weapon off the Protostar and get them the help they need. But first, they need to get her back to her own body where she can actually get this thing going. So, after Janeway has a heartfelt talk with her holographic doppelganger, in which she basically absolves the doppelganger of anything wrong it did, because they know they didn't mean for that to happen. they get an idea how they can send Janeway back and get Dahl back. Meanwhile, back on the Dauntless, Dahl Janeway is, of course, trying to improvise, but this being Dahl, he, of course, kind of reverts to type. And it's a real tribute to how awesome an actress that Kate Mulgrew is, suddenly picking up some of Dahl's, quirkier little affectations, like going pew 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 at one point. Um, but somehow they manage to using charades, because apparently at one point the Dauntless is close enough to the protostar that Dahl Janeway can look out the viewport and see them trying to improvise a message using charades. And essentially the plan will be that both Dahl and Janeway will both exit their respective ships, join hands, and switch over, reverting back to their original forms. Sounds like a great idea, but of course, nothing goes to plan. Um, the command crew of the Dauntless confronts Dahl Janeway and sedates her, but then Dahl Janeway wakes up in sick bay under restraints, and the Diviner is there looking at her. In an unexpected twist, the Diviner lets her go, indicating that he's always thought Starfleet was his enemy, but they helped him, and he's confused. He's not so sure about this anymore. What's going on here? He's confused. Everyone's confused. So Dahl Janeway rushes to where the spacesuits are stored, gets suited up, heads out, but realizes, oh heck, I'm on the wrong side of the ship. So they have to cross the Dauntless, and then sees Janeway Dahl on the other side being tethered by Merc. And so Dahl Janeway jumps off of the Dauntless, heads right to Janeway Dahl, who, like I said, is tethered by Merc to the protostar. And just as they're about to touch, the Dauntless activates its tractor beam to pull Dahl Janeway back aboard the ship. So, with seconds left to spare, Janeway Dahl pulls out their phaser and fires, creating a conduit between them, and they are able to switch bodies back. So now Dahl is back in his form, Janeway's back in hers. They get Dahl back inside the protostar just in time to come out of warp, and oh heck, there's about 20 or 30 Federation starships right in front of them. And Rocktalk, of course, explains, well, we've got Janeway on our side now. Hopefully she can help us. And Dahl's like, yeah, about that. And then our last scene, we see Janeway has been confined to the brig. So that is our sum up of this week's episode. I'm sorry I forgot to mention that this week's episode was called Mind Walk. So, and on that note, let's get to our main segment, the good, the bad, and the Gorn. So, what was good about this episode? Well, I'm going to just go ahead and say everything. I know that's not the right way to go about this, but I was really impressed with this. Like I said, it is a callback to an original series episode. Actually, I think they've done this storyline several times throughout Star Trek, but Turnabout Intruder is the one that I thought of off the top of my head. Many of you who are longtime Star Trek fans probably know that Turnabout Intruder is not really regarded as Star Trek's best episode. But the way they used the storyline, the tropes and everything, I think they did a great job with. As I said before, it is a real sign of how great an actress Kate Mulgrew is to suddenly make you believe that, yeah, this really is Doll inside my head, and he's being Doll. Um, they really have been doing a lot of callbacks to the fact that Doll is an augment. Oh, one key thing I forgot to mention. This is something that's been kind of on our minds, I think, for the last few episodes since we found this out about Doll, is that he's a augment, that he has all his DNA from different Federation races spliced together. Um, and so Janeway indicates to Gwen that there's probably no way he can get into Starfleet because he's an augment. They have very strict laws about that. And even though they did make an exception for Julian Bashir on Deep Space Nine, um, because he'd already been there, he'd already been in Starfleet and practicing medicine for several years and had not caused any problems. Um, Cisco was able to make some sort of arrangement so that he could stay in Starfleet. He wouldn't, but Dahl is such an unknown quantity. I don't see, well, I'm sure Janeway will intervene on his behalf if they get through all this and try to help him get into Starfleet, which is what Dahl really wants to do because he truly admires Janeway and admires Starfleet. And this is kind of his ambition. Uh, that said, I really liked the way the plot worked. There was one great scene where we see Janeway crawling across um, the Dauntless, trying to get in position to jump off to the protostar, and she looks much more bigger. And of course, obviously, we've never really seen what the cameras of the viewports look like in Star Trek, but they're probably quite small. They fit within inside the hull, so probably that was a good twist, that making her look massive, crawling across the viewport, uh, was really quite good. Also, the possibility of spatial distortion. It could have been one of those. If anybody has any thoughts on that, please let me know. I liked that you have the meeting of the minds between Hollow Janeway and Admiral Janeway, and because at one point you hear them playing the old Voyager theme song, and it's such an episode with a lot of heart there, that it's I've loved this since the beginning, that you have somebody with the gravitas and just fan love that Catherine Janeway has, that nobody else could have pulled this off. No one else. I don't even think even Patrick Stewart could have done better with this than Kate Mulgrew has. And um, it was really just a very well written story. Probably, I think, in my opinion, the best episode of this season of Star Trek Prodigy. Uh, it was just, you've really seen in this episode how far these characters have come since they escaped Tossel and Moore as slaves and now have become this crew that wants to be in Starfleet, that wants to go on these adventures. Um, I didn't really have anything bad to say about this episode. I think it was a pretty solid story. I'm sure some people are going to wonder why Eska, who we found out is actually from a Vanderkamp, like the Diviner, why she didn't try to take out Doll Janeway when she had the chance. But I think that that really, I'm not going to nitpick about something like that. Overall, my feeling was it was very well done. For the Gorn, um, well, as I said before, we've had episodes of Star Trek where they've had people switching bodies and actors playing the characters slightly different from their co-stars, and that's always been interesting. Like I said, I think that Kate Mulgrew did a great job, and I think the Bruce Gray, who does Doll, um, also did a great job of duplicating Kate Mulgrew in some ways. And of course, this is ironic because John Noble is on this show, another show that he was on several years ago called Fringe, um, where he actually worked with Leonard Nimoy, who was a recurring character on that show. One of the actors had to imitate Leonard Nimoy, um, doing his mannerisms in a few episodes, and that was quite interesting because Nimoy's character got switched around into this other character's body. It was really interesting to see their own takes on it. I thought that was really brilliantly done, and I really, like I said, I was happy with it. Um, I really hope they'll continue to do this level of great writing in years to come, with not just Prodigy but all the other Star Trek shows that are we have these days. We have such a wealth of them, and I think it's only going to grow because Star Trek is such a big and uh, diverse universe. Um, Moving on to predictions, I think that, as I said before last week, uh, that we are going to see the protostar return to Vanderkamp, and the weapon is going to be unleashed on their world. And I think that I have to amend something last week that I talked about with TJ, that I did not believe that the diviner was going to get redemption. I thought he was going to end up in that circle of great Star Trek villains like Khan and Gul Dukat and Kai Wynn, in that they're villains that blame everybody else for why they do these evil things. They say they don't want to do evil, but they do it anyway. And I think because we've now seen the diviner repay an act of kindness from someone from Janeway, and maybe reconsidering his own stance, that he realizes he might be starting to realize maybe I'm wrong about Starfleet. Why did this happen? And then maybe when he's, because I'm going to go back to my prediction, which I'm going to remind you real quick, was the protostar goes back to Vanderkamp, the diviner's homeworld, and the virus gets unleashed there. And the diviner realizes, oh, wow, I'm the one who created this. I'm the one who caused this. It wasn't Starfleet. It was me all along. I'm going to say that this is where he kind of gets his redemption, that he realizes he was wrong, that he was the cause of his own destruction. So we have that as a possibility, as a possible theory. We only have 2 more episodes to go, and I looked them up on IMDb. The next 2 episodes are going to be called Supernova 1 and 2. So we're going to end on a 2-parter that hopefully will not take us into, it's not going to make us wait a whole year to find out how it's going to be resolved. That we're going to get 2 episodes back to back, on next week, and then the week after, and then that's where this season of Prodigy will come to a close. Also, I do think, I'm going to go back to this, that Janeway is going to find some way to get Dal into Starfleet. I think Dal will do something really huge that Starfleet may reconsider its policy on augments. Just going back, and I should have mentioned this earlier, the reason that Starfleet, the Federation as a whole, have these very strict laws on augments is because of Khan, Noonien Singh, of Earth's eugenics wars. And from some of the things we've heard, it sounds like several other races at the Federation had something similar happen. So they've all been very happy to sign off on strict laws banning genetic manipulation like this, like how Dal was created, or how we assume he's been created. And I think though, as with Bashir, an exception could be made, or maybe they will decide that people who are augments were just, they were born this way. They didn't mean to be born augments, but they exist and they deserve the right to exist as they choose to exist, as long as they're not actually being Khan himself. So maybe they will find a way to help him. Maybe they'll reconsider some of their laws on augments. Um, but I guess we will see here in the next episode, and also moving forward into other Star Trek shows. So, on that note, uh, we're going to wrap up today's episode with a very special holiday greeting to all of our fans and their families throughout the quadrant and across the galaxy. That that 2022 wraps up and 2023 will be a better year for us all, and that we all have a happy holiday, whatever we choose it to be. On that note, this is Josh Pritchett, film critic for Movers and Shakers, writer, and head of the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup Group. You can reach me on Facebook under Josh Pritchett Jr., at meetup.org. Just look for the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup Group. And my book, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural, is still on sale at Amazon and Kindle. And I'm just going to say this, in my personal opinion, it would make a great holiday gift for somebody. So on that note, live long and prosper, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye, everybody.